A Canadian tribunal finds an individual guilty of aiding ISIS, the UK rethinks parental rights for rapists, and we take a look at the stock market. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. What better way to start the long weekend than with some news? This will give you guys some content to talk about if you have some family gatherings going on this weekend. But one thing, just make sure you're talking to a rather chill audience because we've all been there. When the family gets too riled up about politics and news, it usually turns to a shit show and nobody wants to be there. So if you're going to be talking about something kind of controversial, try and keep it chill. So speaking of controversy, what a great segue to lead us into our first topic of the day. A Canadian tribunal finds an individual guilty of aiding ISIS. So the story goes, a mechanic who came to Canada in 2015 under the Harper government has been found complicit in crimes against humanity for assisting ISIS. This is all according to a Global News article. The individual remains unnamed, but the report outlines that before arriving to Canada, he made several trips to Syria to work on ISIS military vehicles and also supervised other ISIS members in terms of mechanics. So, the vehicles that he worked on were used for suicide bombings and combat, as outlined in a 23-page report submitted by the Refugee Appeal Division. This ruling results in him not being able to be eligible for refugee status anymore. So, before we go on, let's just clarify what exactly a refugee is. So, refugees are defined by being forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disasters, and that's very different from the definition of an immigrant. A lot of refugees come from war-torn places, and it's very heartbreaking to hear the stories they have to tell. Well, this individual here directly contributed to that by enabling ISIS to wreak havoc. He was directly responsible for equipping and repairing the vehicles they used for things like suicide bombs and assaults on civilians. So, him trying to claim refugee status when he was the one directly contributing to the chaos across the world is somewhat ironic. So, jumping back into the article now, it took security personnel 3 months to flag him, so it wasn't like he was running around Canada freely for the past 4 years, because like I said, he was taken in 2015 under the Harper government, and only recently was the decision upheld, but there was a close watch on him throughout the entire case procedure. So he presented a defense that he worked for ISIS under duress and only for a brief period of time. In addition to that, he was a Christian, so his ideological beliefs weren't necessarily in line with ISIS either way. So in many cases, duress is a valid defense mechanism, and it should be, because I'll give you an example of a situation where it would be understandable. So let's say ISIS took members of his family hostage, and they essentially threatened him to work for them, otherwise he would face consequences. That would be an understandable situation in which you can plead duress. So people took his claim seriously, and there was an investigation that was mounted and took a long time for all of the details to be compiled, but the evidence mounted on the contrary to what he was saying. The story unfolds where he is approached by a customer one night to repair some vehicles. They take him to an ISIS hangar where all the vehicles are literally soaked in blood. The attendants were asking him to install metal armor on the vehicles, and he also noticed that no license plates were on the vehicles, so there was no way of identifying what they were and who they belonged to. That seems oddly suspicious, right? Maybe some red flags should have gone off at this point. So it was concluded that he was well aware that he was dealing with ISIS, the terror group, from day one. And on 3 occasions, he was taken across the border and was close enough to the fights to see the bullets shelling on the battlefield. On top of this, he supervised other mechanics and gave them instructions precisely on how to complete repairs and install the armor. He was not a hostage according to the report, and there wasn't really any evidence of duress. He was paid generously, treated well, and he was trusted to the extent where he was brought to multiple secret bases. The tribunal couldn't buy his reasoning because he returned voluntarily over and over again to work for ISIS with 0 attempts to flee or even escape the situation. He did the opposite by returning to work for ISIS 4 to 6 more times before trying to leave the country. In relation to this story, there's also another situation unfolding in British Columbia right now, where a refugee who also entered in 2015 has began posting ISIS propaganda online and has been doing so for a consistent basis, and they're trying to figure out what to do with his status right now. Let's make one thing clear here. The immigrant and refugee applications do not turn out like this typically. These are rare cases, you can call them outliers, and banning all refugees or immigrants from entering Canada is obviously not the answer, given that there is obviously a problem here that needs to be addressed. The topic of refugees and immigration itself has become so polarized that people refuse to have conversations about this and would much rather be blinded to the facts and just remain at the mercy of random faith. As Canadians, we rely on immigration to replenish our population. Two things can be true at once, though. We also want to ensure those who enter the country are being screened for threats. Obviously, these here, as I said, are outlier situations, but once it's revealed that refugees have contributed or are currently contributing to ISIS, it's contrary to logic to keep them. First, it poses a massive national security risk. Next, it's insulting to the refugees who are honestly looking to flee from the chaos of their homelands. These individuals, like the accused, are fanning the flames of terror and actively worsening the situation abroad via direct contribution to these backwards causes. They're in part responsible via their contributions to ISIS to the reason why these people are even refugees in the first place and why they have to flee these war-torn countries. One positive here we can establish from the article is that the system appears to be working. Within only 3 months, he was flagged and his case was taken into question. You could argue that 3 months is a long time to have someone running around Canada before they're flagged, but at least he was flagged in a relatively reasonable frame of time. The only real defense you can have for supporting this man is that if you believe he was truly under duress, but based on the tribunal, there was no evidence found that would lead to you to believe that that was accurate. Resources need to be put in place within immigration services to allow for the proper screening of individuals. If they're clean, then by all means we open our arms to you. But if you're complicit in terrorism, you deserve to be denied. There is no excuse for the willing contribution to these regimes. So that pretty much encompasses the entire article with that. Now we're going to make the jump from terrorism to rapists. Amazing, right? The UK has now began to rethink parental rights for rapists. A UK Labour MP made the statement today that men who father children by rape should have their automatic parental rights removed. This article comes out via The Independent, and my first response to this was, wow, that's not currently how it is. It was absolutely mind-boggling to me to realize that rapists who bear a child with a victim are still eligible to receive certain parental rights. Rapists should not automatically have any legal rights to children that are the consequence of their crimes. This issue was brought up due to a case that they are currently reviewing over in the UK. There was a lady named Sheffield Healy, and she was raped by an individual named Arshid Hussein, and she ended up keeping the baby that resulted from this sexual violence. So the rapist, Mr. Hussein, was encouraged to apply to the courts for his parental right to contact with the child. First of all, two things. That is extremely destructive for the child and the victim. Being forced to be in contact with someone who raped you is obviously psychologically traumatizing for Ms. Healy. Forcing upon the rapist to be in a situation where he has to communicate with her and figure out when he'd be able to view the child really doesn't seem to be all that healthy to me. And on top of that, there is the child itself who you have to think about as well. How damaging do you think that would be to a kid's psyche? You're going to see your father, who is currently in jail for raping your mother. Like, how would that even play out in your head? First of all, you'd realize that you are kind of an unwanted child. You are the result of a crime, and your father's not a good role model. He's currently locked up, and your mother has suffered traumatically because of your birth. Well, it's not directly the kid's fault, obviously. It is the rapist who caused this to occur, but now you're forcing the kid to come into contact with that, and at a young age, coming to grips with the reality of the situation can be extremely destructive. This really only benefits the perpetrator. It literally causes a rift in every other aspect of this very complicated relationship. So, my question is, did this fool really think it's some type of fairy tale that they're going to live happily ever after? He's going to end up meeting this kid and they're going to be all good? This should not be the default of consideration. Automatic rights shouldn't be given to a rapist. It should be the opposite, actually. These rights to the child should only be granted in exceptional circumstances, and the typical rape case is definitely not that. Typically, these family courts rule in the best interest of the child, and I fail to see how this protects a child at all. It is true that having a father figure in a young person's life is extremely valuable and often contributes to their development, but You have to ask yourself, what type of role model is this? The rape victim was 18 when she met Mr. Hussein, and he was one of 3 brothers behind the grooming and sexual abuse of over 50 girls. He was sentenced to jail for 35 years in 2016. This is not a father figure. He really is a heinous criminal, and I'm in full agreement on the situation with the MP here. Procedures need to be put in place and revised because currently it seems like they have things backwards. It's absurd how a rapist is trying to weasel his way into a family lifestyle from the confines of a jail cell. I believe they're all better off without him in the picture at all. And I have to give kudos to the victim in the situation. She's obviously demonstrated extreme strength to, first of all, still choose to have the child from a man who raped her. That itself is very psychologically damaging. Every time you look at your child, it may be a reminder of such a negative thing, but at the same time, you've brought an innocent life into the world, and that itself is beautiful too. So it's really a microcosm of chaos and order. And on top of that, she's having to relive the experience now because this derp is out here trying to claim his way into the family, and that itself must be very infuriating. So hopefully he gets rejected, and hopefully they can revise these laws to make sure it doesn't occur again. Now, moving on to our final story, the TSX closes at a record high. Toronto stocks were up nearly 16% in 2019, so for the first quarter essentially. The S&P is also at a high. If you made investments at the start of the year, or even before that, you're sitting pretty right now. Cannabis stocks are looking good, and the flagship seems to be Canopy Growth. They rose over 8% after making a deal to acquire a US firm, Acreage Holdings. Other sectors that are doing well include retail and car sales, but in terms of retail, the growth is mainly being driven by e-commerce. Traditional brick and mortar stores are still on the decline, as they've been for a long time now. And another cool thing is Pinterest went public recently, and they've contributed mostly to the American exchanges by bringing in a lot of volume. It kind of goes with the trend of social media companies going public. You now have Pinterest joining the likes of Facebook and Snapchat. Facebook seems to be the cream of the crop here. They've had some really, really massive ups and recently some pretty low lows, but at the same time, it's a very profitable share to be the owner of. On the opposite side of that, in terms of failure, we have Snapchat. So it'll be cool to see where Pinterest lands between those two. The reason why I consider Snapchat a failure was for their debut, it was very highly publicized. People were excited. It was selling for around $27 per share back then. And ever since, they've been going down steadily. It's the opposite of what every investor hopes for. They want it to go up steadily, or even up rapidly. Snapchat's been on the decline. Right now, it's only selling for $11 a share. So this leads me to one general rule for investments I want to share with you. Look beyond the name recognition of the companies and ask yourself, how are they making money? Is it sustainable? And are they profitable? Everyone knows Snapchat, but they really only have one revenue stream, ads, which suck on their platform, oddly enough. Literally, nobody watches them. The ROI isn't there for a lot of companies, and as a result, they're not too keen to advertise on this platform. Snapchat's monetization efforts haven't really kept up, and it's killed their stock value. If you want to advertise on social media, you might as well make use of Facebook's extensive collection of user data, something Snapchat doesn't have. Obviously, Snapchat can turn it around, but if you're going to be investing, see beyond the hype to make rational decisions. Unless you're a big-time risk taker and safety isn't really a criteria for you, then have at it. Invest in whatever you want, maybe Pinterest now. So I have a little bit of a prediction. This might be the year of weed and crypto. As I mentioned before, weed stocks are doing well, and even in the crypto market, cryptocurrencies, things are trending upwards. Bitcoin is breaking over $5,000 now. Still a far cry from what it was a couple years ago, but it's on the upward trend to start 2019 off. This is literally meme central. Weed and crypto. Much dank, hodl. I can already tell it's going to be a fun year. So before we end off and I send you well into the long weekend, I want to talk about one thing. The topic today is Lil Dicky. He's a rapper and he released a new music video today called Earth. It's #1 trending on YouTube, and first of all, Lil Dicky's actually pretty good. I'm a fan of his. And this music video is absolutely hilarious. And the way he did it, it's really a mashup of a bunch of different celebrities who are voicing certain creatures, animals, germs, amoebas, whatever else you can find in the music video. And it's really to raise awareness for the earth and the environment. So Lil Dicky's obviously the lead of the song, but there are a bunch of celebrities in this as well. Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, Halsey, even Wiz Khalifa, Snoop Dogg, Kevin Hart, Shawn Mendes, Sia, Miley Cyrus, Joel Embiid, a basketball player, the Backstreet Boys. He literally amassed a bunch of celebrities together to put together really a masterpiece, I think. This is an amazing music video, and I encourage anyone who hasn't seen it yet to look it up. The animation itself is pretty cute and quite breathtaking, and there's a really good storyline, and it really keeps your attention. It's like 7 minutes long, but you never feel bored throughout it. And Lil Dicky really has, first of all, before I move on, I don't know why he chose that name. Obviously, he wants to be a meme rapper. It's like, come on, your name is Lil Dicky. How can you not laugh at that? But he's made a name for himself recently. He kind of has a trend of making these weird, long songs that tackle these abstract concepts from time to time. He has another track that kind of put me onto him. I believe it's called Pillow Talking, and it's once again like 7 minutes long. And he starts the song off by, it's more of a story, honestly. It's you can consider it an ebook, to be honest, with a beat and like a rap vocalist reading it out to you. So the song starts off with him recounting an experience of a hookup. And from that hookup, the girl wants to stay the night. Throughout the evening, the discussions continue to get deeper and deeper. He ends up voicing himself and the female in the song as they're discussing these weird topics. They talk about aliens, talk about conspiracy theories, talk about war, talk about pepperoni on pizza. And it's just so interesting because the conversations, they feel like they're real. And you can kind of imagine yourself having that talk as well. So it's honestly really funny how he has a talent of doing things like this. And it might be a trend. I can see this crossing over almost into a separate genre of music that combines podcast and conversation. So, yep, if you want to see the latest one, it's called Earth. If you like that, maybe look into Pillow Talk as well. So, that about does it for today. Thanks for joining me on the Perri platform. I'll see you soon.